Broadcasting from our New England studio, Solutions Review is proud to showcase PCG and Infor in the Solution Spotlight, an inside look at enterprise technologies.
I'm Doug Atkinson here at Solutions Review, and welcome to the Solution Spotlight featuring PCG and Infor, and focused on agility by design, how manufacturers thrive safely amid disruption, and how that disruption is reshaping auto suppliers. The automotive industry is evolving at breakneck speed. There is greater uncertainty now than ever before, and long-held assumptions are being demolished on a daily basis. This industry inflection point is a pivotal opportunity for suppliers to completely redefine their role in the value chain and transform themselves from part suppliers into true co-innovation partners with customers. Given the increased focus on reshoring U.S. manufacturing, suppliers must embrace advanced technologies across their value chains. The time to act is now. A wait-and-see approach is a sure way to lose revenue, profits, and market share. So to drive this conversation, we have invited ERP expert Kyler Cheatham. Kyler is the Chief Performance Officer at The Confluential. She is also a noted enterprise technology marketer, influencer, and podcaster. Kyler, I'm going to hand this event over to you now. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Doug. I am super excited and very honored to be your host here for this amazing panel. We've got lots of stuff to unpack in the automotive industry and kind of talk about where we're going in the future. So the auto industry is really in the middle of a massive change, from electric vehicles to software-defined vehicles, AI in supply chain. Right at the center of it is technology. So we gathered some guests today to kind of take us through what is the state of technology in this specific industry. So we have Sandeep, who leads AI and machine learning across Infor and brings deep experience, which I think is about 25 years, Sandeep, of AI and machine learning experience that you're bringing to the conversation today. So we're super excited to learn from you. We also have Dennis, who is our automotive industry director at PCG Services, with another 25 years of helping those tier one suppliers get the most out of their ERP and digital transformation. And then last but certainly not least, we have Peter, who is our global strategy lead for automotive at Infor, who's been guiding our OEM community and suppliers through transformations for more than 3 decades. So a ton of info here. And let's get right into it to kind of go through what the state of the industry is. So I'm going to go to you first, Peter. And we've heard a lot about the term specifically acceleration, which I love that term because it not only applies to technology, but an automotive term as well. In innovation in this industry specifically, so what are some of the biggest disruptors you're seeing today?
Sure, Carla, thanks, and pleasure to be here. So I think the biggest disruptor on a sort of a macro level is the uncertainty. And there's just so much going on in the industry from multiple angles that the industry really is having a hard time sort of figuring out how to navigate these waters. And there are 3 main sort of reasons for this uncertainty, if you will. One is the reordering of the global trading order with the tariffs and the sanctions and things like that. And in fact, a recent automotive news survey showed that automakers, there's a 14% drop in confidence across the industry in terms of gross margins, and that, of course, is directly related to tariffs and the additional potential costs. So there's the impact of the tariffs and so on. There's also the impact of the policy changes, especially from the U.S. administration, right? So with the shift away from just an all EV strategy and this quote unquote EV mandate, or what it's been called as it's been called, but more towards a mix of powertrains and options. That has really significantly impacted automakers' plans. And in fact, there's the same survey in Automotive News said that automakers have like a 10% lower confidence in the certainty as going forward, right? So there's that uncertainty aspect. And then last but not least is the evolution in the industry towards software-defined vehicles, which is much more than it seems on the surface, because it's not just about the technology, but it's also about a massive culture change across the industry. So those are the three main disruptors that are causing a lot of upheaval and a lot of opportunity, by the way, in the industry.
Absolutely. And that's a lot to unpack there. And I assume, going over to Dennis, that is really difficult for a lot of our legacy systems within our industry for automotive. How do you innovate in this type of area of uncertainty?
Yeah, so once again, talking about those legacy systems, they're really, your risk of not upgrading those legacies is really being left behind. Staying on these legacy systems means missing out on the latest R&D, process innovations, and new product opportunities. OEMs need a digital partner nowadays as we move forward. Not data black holes. They'll naturally gravitate towards suppliers who can innovate at speed and scale, leveraging their modern platforms, connected data and real-time collaboration. Right now, doing nothing isn't standing still. It's actually actively falling behind.
Absolutely. And when we kind of layer in the doing nothing, we seem to have kind of two different divergent paths, Sandeep, which is, kind of use your legacy system to integrate things like AI or machine learning, or replace your legacy system to be ahead of the AI and machine learning in that sort of innovation. Can you kind of give us some examples of what you're seeing in the marketplace when it comes to these two quote unquote emerging technologies? They might not be emerging for you, but they are for us in the industry.
And thank you for the question, Kyler. It's a very important distinction, right? Which is, do I look at my technology investment from my technology and innovation perspective, or am I pragmatic and looking at the ecosystem and saying, how can I have quick wins? And I think that I'm a firm believer in adopting futuristic approaches as long as they have pragmatic beliefs and measurable benefits, right? And so we see that. So I would endorse both approaches. I think that generally looking at technology and where it's progressing with the use of lots of data and interconnected systems, we would always endorse, trying to go into the future and having a system that can allow you to capture this information and process it and be predictive with it. But, we also see a lot of benefit pragmatically in also having this quick win. So I know that didn't answer your question because I said all of the above. When it comes to AI, I would always say all of the above right now will always be my strategy.
Yeah, well, that's a great strategy. It's very inclusive, if you will. And I think we can take this kind of piece by piece in the industry because, like you said, right, using our legacy system can be holding us back. Really, it depends on the situation. It depends on the ecosystem. And you really kind of have to get in there and identify what your needs are as a business. But I'm curious, when we look at other influencers in that conversation, Peter, like the role of the suppliers are also changing with that innovation. So can you talk about how that whole supply chain really needs to be part of that transformation?
Sure, Kyler. So, by the way, I just thought when Sandeep was talking about being inclusive in AI, I thought maybe AI should stand for all inclusive, right?
I love it. Make that change today. Absolutely.
Yeah, there you go. So sorry, but anyway, to come back to your question, I think if I understand you correctly, so yes, the role of the supplier when it comes to their relationship in the industry and the ecosystem and the OEM. So it's because of the way the industry is evolving and because of the complexity, that old role of just the supplier and that old relationship, that dynamic of the supplier and the OEM, or the OEM and supplier, that sort of was very linear, that is going away. And really what the industry is moving into, it's already in fact there, it's an interconnected network. So it's not just a linear supply chain, if you will. And so because of the many different capabilities that are required that come together in the vehicle, so vehicles they've got so much complexity with the software aspect and so on, as I mentioned earlier, and the fact that now you've got, infotainment, and you've got navigation, you've got retail providers, you've got municipalities and infrastructure, you've got other vehicles. All of these entities are trying to communicate and come together and deliver services and capabilities in the vehicle, right? We all experience these things when we've driven our vehicles. So all of these things are what I would call many of these are non-traditional capabilities that the auto industry doesn't have. So in order to be able to sort of fully move in this direction, no one company can go alone, can go it alone. No matter how big of an OEM you are, you can't go it alone. And that's why there's such a need for suppliers to ramp up their game. And it's an opportunity for them as well to really become co-innovation partners with the OEMs and really help them with the change. Because, as I said, it's just too broad scale and too massive to be able to go it alone. There's just too many things going on. And I think it's a great opportunity for suppliers to become greater partners to OEMs and bring more value to the table through innovation.
Most definitely. I love that you use the term partners, because a lot of times that's been a challenge in the industry going forward. Being able to earn your seat at the table as a partner is so critical. And Dennis, I'd love you to speak to how suppliers can really show up for that innovation partnership.
Yeah, it really means, getting in the room from day one. And when I say the room, it can be a virtual room, it can be inside a room, right? But it's collaborating on the design with real-time feedback in the loops, sharing data openly between. That's not always been a given in automotive, is that sharing back and forth. But that's going to become critical as we move forward, and ensuring the transparency across the entire product life cycle. Technology does play a key role in here too, connecting the platforms, digital twins that we could talk about, the real-time analytics, giving us the ability to co-develop solutions faster and smarter. But true co-innovation is about shaping the solution together, though, and not reacting after the fact.
Absolutely. And I mean, we kind of talked about how that's working, how you show up. And Sandeep, I'd love for you to tell us, if those connected ecosystems, how honestly realistic is that for tier 2 or tier 3 suppliers to adopt these tools? Your kind of pragmatic but inclusive approach.
It's an important question, and I think you hit on the keyword about the pragmatic side, right? Because in some ways, pragmatic and inclusive may not work well together in this industry. So I think when we talk about pragmatic, and especially where AI has started to be demonstratively very valuable in the industry, is it's going to be impossible to fully get into the heads of the OEM to service. I think everyone would love that, and if you did, I think the need for AI will not be as much and prevalent in this industry, if I'll be honest with you. But how do you infer demand patterns based on limited information, but also looking at your surrounding information? And how do you use that incomplete picture to train and upskill your team to not only anticipate OEM demands, but their customer demands, and also supplier and raw material challenges, and be able to model it, right? Dennis talked about the concept of the twin, right? And from an automotive perspective, what is pragmatic is how can you do some light quick process that would allow you to predict customer demand at a high level and say, based on this, I am over or under allocating to fulfill those contracts that you have signed, right? I think that is the pragmatic first step, the necessary first step in this industry based on what is happening.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think there's a level of understanding in that too, especially when it comes to digital twin technology. We still see, that narrative around the red-eyed robot, and we're like, wait, digital twin technology is simply, a level at which you're measuring your data and how you do that as an ecosystem. But I wonder, can we get over not only that narrative, but also the cost, Peter, associated with that? It's, a huge modernization initiative. How do you do that without completely overhauling, even stopping your entire operations? What's the balance that we find between evolution and staying competitive and disrupting the industry?
Sure. No, that's a great question. So, again, no one size fits all, no one answer is all encompassing. But I think starting maybe small with small bite-sized chunks, if you will, is one way to sort of address this. And like you said, not just throw everything out all at once. There's a couple of different ways you can look at it. So you can, for example, take what we might call an outside-in approach. So, for example, you could modernize some of your what you might call edge systems. So let's say your warehouse management system or your PLM or your manufacturing execution system, which are outside of your core ERP. Okay, so that's why I call them edge systems. So you could modernize them and link them to your existing ERP and then eventually move to a newer ERP if it makes sense. And that's what I would call an outside-in approach. You could also, for example, do an inside-out approach. So you could keep your existing edge systems if they're serving your needs, and you could upgrade your ERP and connect it to your existing edge systems, and then eventually maybe look at your edge systems down the road. So that would be an inside-out approach, starting with your ERP and then moving out to your edge systems. So there's a couple different ways you can do it. The key is to really look at what makes sense for you as a company, as an organization, and to take a pragmatic approach and do it in reasonable chunks, if you will. But those are some of the ways in which you can address it.
Yeah, great answer, Peter. I love that answer. So Dennis, if I'm one of your automotive clients and I'm struggling, with my spaghetti bowl dinosaur of an operations system in here, and I come to you and say, hey, we got to do something. I know that. But I also know that we're in a level of uncertainty with compliance, with regulations. How do you navigate that ability to say, okay, I know we have a lot going on with tariffs and things like that, but we have to kind of move forward with modernizing within this type of approach, whether it be inside out or vice versa?
Yeah, and that's a great question. Really, once again, it's about business processes, but also investing in the digital platforms that gives the OEMs that transparent access to progress and reduce risk. And the transparency builds a trust, right? A trust, however, has been slow to take root in our industry. It's been around a long time, but we learned a lot during the COVID times. Once again, that showed us the truth that we either sink or we swim together, right? The suppliers who embrace this mindset and backed it with data and visibility earned a permanent seat at the table. Once again, we talked a little bit earlier about getting a seat at the table, right? And, it's important for them. Once again, when it comes to their legacy systems, this is just one part, as Peter mentioned. There's edge solutions that can help us tie to some of these legacy systems, but it's really them getting, really going through the evaluation to figure out where their gaps are and what is their best approach. As Peter mentioned, in out or out in. It really depends on their current situation.
Dennis mentioned a very key word, and Sandeep has mentioned it too, and it's data. Really, data is such a key thing that's really the underlying thread of all of the things that we've been saying. And, having that culture of data is so critical. And that's based on a survey that Infor recently did. We call it Help Us What Happens. That's one of the characteristics of leading organizations, is having that culture of data. So I just wanted to interject that because it's such a point.
Another example, as Kylie mentioned, was the tariffs, right? Tariffs don't wait for contract renewals. It doesn't wait for upgrades to the system. It doesn't wait for any of that. They hit instantly. And I have customers that are really struggling out there right now with figuring out what to do, how to source without eating all the costs, right? Suppliers need to be agile with their systems to really understand what that landed cost is so they can enable rerouting as they move forward, any visibility down the supply chain. But once again, getting these systems, getting the data, as Peter mentioned, is key. But then how do you turn that data into information to be able to use that?
Absolutely. So Sandeep, how do you turn that data into information to use that?
So AI makes it all possible, Kyler. You just have to ask the AI engine a short answer. But I think if you seriously think of it, right, and I was while we were having planning for this discussion, we were thinking of how the world is changing in a exponential, complex manner, right? So we were a couple of years ago, we were talking about how can AI help with the Suez Canal traffic issue, right? In terms of the impact to supply chain. And then, we're talking about the current macro conditions. How is AI going to help navigate the fact that tariff policy is changing, macro relationships between economies are changing, customer behavior as you come out of COVID and getting into a more normal behavior, if that's a thing, is changing. How is retail practices changing? In automotive, there's a transformation where what we thought customer behavior was going to be around EVs 2 years ago is now different, right? It's especially in North America. And so what AI is good for, it's not a secret crystal ball. I wish it was, right? But in some ways, it allows you to navigate new and evolving market conditions by taking an understanding of data. Now, it'll be great if you can democratize it and have everyone have access to the same information. But generally, where I see AI really driving it is just being able to collect that information, and even if it's in different places, using it to say, how can my supply chain be better and more resilient from a sourcing perspective? How are my customers doing, and are they doing the same as before? And if no, what can we do to help partner with them? Are my parts and my supply resiliency of sourcing those parts, taking into account some of the tariff impacts Dennis was talking about? And then if not, what should I do? And if I don't like the suggestion, what should I do instead, right? And that, I think, is transformative as customers in our industry are adopting. So I'm very excited at some of these use cases and how they are helping automotive the way retailers have been using in the past, right? In some cases, automotive is just using something that retailers have been doing for many, many years, right? And I want to I call that out. This is not an invention. It's a reinvention of something that has been common in many, many industries in the past.
Absolutely. Kind of reorganizing that. Go ahead, Peter.
Sorry, can I add something to what Sandeep was saying?
Oh, of course.
Which regarding AI, and I'm not claiming to be the AI guy. That's Sandeep's role here. But one of the interesting stats that I read was that according to a survey by PricewaterhouseCoopers, that AI-driven preventative maintenance can reduce maintenance costs by 20 to 30%. So there's an example of how AI can help with something as routine as plant maintenance, right? Another example, and a use case that we as at Infor helped the customer with was defect detection on the line. It was an automotive supplier, and we helped them improve their detection rate, if you will, by 99%, and we reduced the failures by like 75%. It was like staggering numbers, and that was just one use case. So AI has tremendous potential across the board. It's not a magic bullet, but it used properly.
You're right.
It absolutely can be transformative, as Sandeep said.
Absolutely. Yes, 100%. And so to back up, before we really dive into those use cases around AI, I want to unpack a word you said, Dennis, around data visibility. And that's been a big piece of this overall conversation and the fundamentals needed to be AI ready. So can you explain to us what that term means before we kind of dive into the how?
Yeah. So once again, the data driven, I'm going to use the typical supply chain, right? I mean, that is one of them, but we got quality, we got all this other areas, but we struggle with just the demand changing and how quickly that demand changes and gets down our supply chain. Sometimes our lower level suppliers end up eating the cost because it's sort of downhill. And as things change, the whole supply chain has to react, right? So the more we can get into getting that data, being able to get trends, and me and Sandeep talked about this a little bit. How can we use AI around this area? Because it's, as and with Peter, it's not a crystal ball, all right? So it's been a challenge that we've had for years. The demand, carrying that inventory for us suppliers is costly, mostly with the margins that we have. So once again, figuring out how we can take that data, use it so we can streamline our supply chain. And really, as we talk with the tiers anymore, the tiers are almost going away. We're actually becoming more, everybody's working with each other. So hopefully with this collaboration and using the AI tools, we can start preparing for any changes in the demand. And like I said, this is daily stuff I'm talking about, change in the industry, change in demand. And once again, not to hit what we saw with the COVID, but we learned quickly that our planning down the supply chain has some work to do. And that's really where getting this information, having some what if scenarios and using AI to really help us be able to react and know if this happens and we can react this way.
Something that we need to keep in mind is that, yes, AI can do a lot of these things, and yes, we need the data to do it. But that's the thing; it all depends on the quality and the availability of the data, right? And to be honest, many of the quote unquote smaller suppliers, or the folks that are maybe the lower tiers, if you will, they just don't have the systems at this time to be able to provide that level of quality data, and so that becomes a challenge, because unless you have that deep visibility, you really don't have true visibility. In fact, only 40% of automotive organizations, according to another survey we did, only 40% of organizations feel that they really have visibility. And even I would question even that number. So the point is that the industry really has to work at this from a bottom-up approach, because the deeper you go, the less sort of good your data is, and that affects all the results all the way to the top, right? Garbage in, garbage out. So,
yeah, it's sort of the saying, your weakest supplier is really the best you're doing, right? I mean, so they need to work together to strengthen that supply chain.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And Tyler, I want to add to the concept of visibility, right? And I'll be amiss if I don't use the word Gen AI in an AI discussion at least once in the webinar. So I had to push that in. But if you think of what has happened in the last year that's transformative, is that we now are able to communicate with our data directly in a way that was not easily possible, right? And so with the advent of generative AI, what is generative AI? Is the ability to ask questions like a human would and get answers right away from very complex questions and answers, right? So I use it for cooking recipes, which is a different topic. But in automotive, if you think of the biggest challenge is that you're a customer sales rep and you have a customer saying, hey, I ordered these parts, where is it? Why are they not the way I wanted? And you're able to just ask those questions, get those answers, either directly or as a middle facing person. And I think that visibility is transformative in any industry, and especially in automotive, where you're dealing with customer retentions, low margin, and just being able to look at very complex ecosystem of distribution channels, right? And I do want to call out that visibility we take for granted also assumes quick and easy accessibility, which is where the Gen AI has really been transformative.
Yeah, for sure. And so, Peter, tell us about the fundamentals that are needed for these types of behaviors. Specifically, if you walk into an automotive partner, what are you seeing that needs to be either changed or needs to be implemented to be a data-driven automotive business?
Sure. So, as I think I mentioned earlier, one of the things we at Infor have done recently is publish a survey called How Possible Happens. And it's a global survey. And for automotive, we surveyed over 400 automotive organizations globally of all kinds, right, all sizes. And a couple of things stand out. So there are these, when you talk about what are sort of these pillars, or what do we look for, or what do companies need to look at, is if you look at the best performing companies, they've got, first of all, they've built or architected bulletproof processes and systems, okay? So they have a very strong process discipline, and they have really invested in technology to be able to sort of be leading edge. And in fact, 75% or more of automotive organizations, again, that we have surveyed have indicated that they expect technology to be a major driver of value. Now, that doesn't mean they've all reached that point yet. That doesn't mean that, but they realize that there's a lot of value in it, right? So bulletproof processes and systems are a big part of it. Another big thing, and I touched on this earlier, is this quote unquote culture of data. Okay, and that there's a lot behind that term. Because the concept of culture itself is just as weighty as data, okay? Because you've got data, which we know, we can understand it's a sort of relatively definable and understandable thing. It's bits and bytes, and it's things that flow through an electronic system. But it's the culture that really trips organizations up, right? Because to have that culture of data, to be data-driven, is a completely different thing than most organizations, even now, are really used to. And that is one of the big challenges. So those are a couple of things that leading organizations are doing, is they've really built a culture of data, or building a culture of data, and they've got bulletproof systems and processes in place to help them move forward.
Absolutely. So Dennis, talk to us about you kind of talked to us about the legacy system, right? And kind of the risks that can go in with that. Talk about the importance of the processes in this whole conversation around data, technology, what that process looks like and how critical that is.
Yeah, and actually, Peter sort of hit it a little bit, and it's culture of the data, but it's also culture of your business processes. A lot of our suppliers have been around a long time. We're starting to age in some of these tier 1, tier 2 suppliers. But once again, it starts with the process discipline. I really believe in that. If you can't write it down on a napkin to do your process, then a system isn't going to resolve all those issues. But once again, we examine how they really work today, looking at their processes, but really start looking at benchmarking against some of the industry standards and where they're at compared to that. Because once again, if you don't know where you're at, how do you know where you're going to be going, right? So once again, identifying where these complexities can be simplified or automated, right, to reduce that discipline, and even small wins with the legacy systems or newer systems, like eliminating redundant steps in the process, applying RPA to repetitive tasks, so we can start delivering ROI and build momentum for larger projects. Too often we start large and we have some issues during these implementations, and money spent, and people are saying it isn't successful. But we need to be aiming at those low-hanging fruit in those processes, because until you can build that foundation, you can't build the house, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I would be remiss if I also didn't mention that another characteristic of leading organizations is that they are architected for agility and scalability. That's a critical thing, because especially given all the uncertainty that we're talking about and the technology developments that, in terms of AI and everything else, and the way things are developing, that agility is a key piece of it, and scalability, to be able to scale up, scale down, and to be able to pivot quickly on a dime when things happen. That is critical. And the way that, we feel to achieve that is to have the right kind of technology architecture, which in this case would be what we call a multi-tenant cloud-based architecture, because that truly allows you're not limited by sort of the parameters of your own system. You have the ability to scale up and consume more capacity or less as your business needs change, right? And only a cloud system can give you that scalability, infinite scalability. So I just wanted to put that out there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Multi-tenant cloud is really critical for that interoperability and really understanding what that looks like as far as those innovations. So Sandeep, before we get too deep in the innovations here, how important is things like governance around AI implementation, specifically being able to understand that traceability of the data? I think a lot of times we see an AI implementation and we say, oh, these observation dashboards or this data visibility is absolute gold, Bible truth, when we need to be able to understand, is this actually legitimate insights, or do we need to go through looking at how we got these types of insights? So can you talk to us a little bit about that?
It's an important question, especially when you're starting to build a business that is looking to future-proof. I think that's the word Peter used in terms of how you want to devise and build these ecosystems, right? And So governance is, in my mind, a couple of different things, especially when it comes to AI. There is, of course, trust in making sure that the information you're using to build your AI solutions is reliable and reflects what you want out of it. You want to make sure that you're not making recommendations that are not useful or incorrect. Of course, there in some parts of the modeling, there is a concept of bias. So you're making sure you're not providing something that is offensive or in some ways looking at information that you shouldn't, right? So there's that aspect of governance and also looking at making sure the people looking at this information have the right roles and responsibility to look at it. But the most important part of me when I hear governance, right? And so if you look at the automotive industry and generally anything related to complex supply chain, we have a workforce that is needs to be brought along and needs to be empowered and feel energized that they are going to use this to upskill themselves as well as benefit companies. And so the governance is also about how you augment that interaction between machines and people so that they're uplifting their day-to-day jobs as well as the quality of the job for the business, right? So in some sense, there's security, there's trust, and then there's how are you bringing people along? And that is also, in my mind, an important part of governance.
Yeah, absolutely. That literacy piece is so critical. And Peter's, culture of data, that's, the foundations of building that is really understanding how you take your culture along with you. So I want to do a few round robin questions, give you guys an opportunity to answer some advice and some, questions around how do we get ROI. So first I want to start with, if you were to give one piece of advice to a supplier that's trying to prepare for what's next in this level of uncertainty and this need to be competitive, what would it be? And I'm going to start with you, Dennis.
That's a great question. I need the AI tool to be able to tell me that.
Yeah, right.
No, it's with the ever changing and the problems that the suppliers are having, they're behind, right? I mean, it's a lot of legacy systems that they need to address. But once again, too often they're trying to go for these large wins, and once again, they need to start looking at it from little modules to find out what their areas of improvement are needed, right? So is it quality? Is it the supply chain? Is it just communicating such simple things as EDI? Because that's huge in the automotive industry. But once again, they need to make sure that they're getting small wins that can return on investment. Once again, little things in automotive, getting mislabeling, stuff like that cost our suppliers money. And the more we can automate that, or at least have tools to check that. We continue to put tools in place with some of my customers to make sure that when they're labeling off the line side labeling, they don't need to relabel again. So we reduce some of that. And once again, it seems very simple, but there's a ripple effect when parts are mislabeled and they get to the OEM, and all of a sudden things get pulled off the line and you're shutting down the OEM. So once again, it goes back to really finding that area, benchmarking it, and then deciding and attacking it strategically versus just, I need a new system, right? They really need to look at it that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great answer, certainly. What about you, Sandeep? What would be your advice?
And Dennis actually covered a lot of the key points. And so I'm going to come up with something extremely underwhelming compared to his answer, which is how do you take paper processes and push them into the digital ecosystem, right? Converting paper to data, you can talk about that as an RPA kind of low-tech use case, but in some ways the most valuable start of a journey in our industry. To Dennis's point, we don't want to get too far into scrap if you don't have that initial investment in, automating your data entry to be digital, and then maybe also looking at your processes from a process mining perspective and say, how much time am I spending in each of these? And can my time be optimized elsewhere, right? And I think, when you look at that, then you'll say, well, that doesn't seem very, very cool. I think that is the biggest bang for the buck to start. And then you gradually build into more and more complex use cases if you're starting that journey.
Yeah. I mean, personally, I think that's super cool, but that might be like a nerd alert there, but absolutely. I mean, that's so critical. So Peter, take us home on what your advice would be.
Sure. So now, how do I top what you just heard from these two guys? I mean, when you go last, everything's already been said, right?
I know.
So let me quickly enter it into ChatGPT and see what it says.
Yeah.
No.
No. So, okay. So I do have a couple of thoughts. So first of all, as we've been talking about all these cool things, technologies, data, et cetera, all very, very important, AI. But I think we just also need to make sure that everything that is done, all these initiatives are aligned to business strategy, okay? Because it's very easy to get distracted by the latest shiny object, whether that's RPA, robotic process automation, or AI, or different types of AI, agentic AI, Gen AI, whatever. All these different terms. Every day there's a new cool buzzword, right? So nerd alert, right? But it's easy to get focused on those and forget about the reason that we're doing these things is because there's a business, there is a business strategy. Most companies have one, otherwise they wouldn't be around. And all these things need to tie to that business strategy. So that's one thing. And the second thing I wanted to just say, if you'll allow me a second point, maybe two more, is really quickly, is that we cannot forget about the culture aspect. Again, I talked about it earlier, but I have to emphasize that because that is the number one reason why major IT initiatives fail. That is just across the board, a culture, not managing the people aspects of the change. You got to keep people front and center. And then last but not least, I would also add this, that as companies look to evaluate systems to upgrade, whether it's outside in or inside out, whatever, you need to build an IT architecture that's modular and that can connect to different sources of data, right? Because if you've got a monolithic system that only connects to systems from that vendor, then you're in trouble. But you've got to have a core or even an edge that is interoperable, if you will, with different systems in your IT portfolio. So I think that's a very important thing that can also that can avoid a lot of stress and heartache down the road.
I was going to add one more thing to Peter's thing because he got me excited as he's talking about that. It's one of my favorite topics, and that he was really hitting home on change management.
Yeah.
Right. That has been, to Peter's point, has been a killer of some ERP projects in the past. You got the systems, you got the technology, but you're not changing the culture, as we've been calling it, at the suppliers. So once again, that change management tends to be a piece that people leave out, and is really a big piece of these implementations. Even if it's small edge products or whatever you're doing, you need to include change management in your approach. If not, you're already behind the eight ball, because that change management's a big piece. And I just I know Peter brought it up, and I just feel very strongly about it. So
yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
No.
Yeah.
And, Dennis, so I'm riffing off of what Dennis just said too. When you talk about culture, it's not just the ERP and all that, which is of course a big thing, but as the industry moves towards software-defined vehicles, there's a huge need to change to become more like a tech company. So whether you're an OEM or whether you're a supplier, the industry needs to think more like tech companies, and they have very different operating cycles, right? Very different clock speeds, very different ways of doing things. Tech upgrades occur every 6 months. There's a new, or whatever. Every few weeks, it seems like there's a new push of an OS on my phone, right? Whereas automotive companies and sort of old school metal bending companies, they operate on a different clock speed, right? And so there's a need for companies, automotive to the industry, to really become sort of more like tech companies, because that's where we're going. We're becoming tech companies. We are tech companies.
Absolutely. I think that's so critical. And that's the perfect segue into kind of my final round robin question here is, for companies that are just starting, or even companies that are on their journey to their automotive digital transformation, what is a good focus point to ensure that they're including ROI specific tactics within their strategy? At the end of the day, we all need to prove our investment when it comes to technology, whether that's culturally, whether that's from a process standpoint or from a technical standpoint. How do you ensure that your clients are making ROI a priority? And Sandeep, I'm actually going to start with you on this one.
Oh, so that is very easy when it comes to the supplier base, right? And because ultimately, the easiest way to measure ROI is from the prism of how good are you in moving goods to your customers, right? And so we talk of, looking at your inventory turns as a more specific ROI, but ultimately it's, how are you setting up your business processes to be agile and keeping up with those challenges I talked earlier, and keeping your revenue flowing, and how is technology and ERP investment and AI helping with the inventory or a quality, or in some cases, the human turnover, right, would be the things that I would measure as metrics of, sniffing or checking through your investments in technology.
Absolutely. Those are some critical KPIs there too. So Peter, I won't make you go last this time. So you go second.
Gee, thanks, Skylar.
You're welcome.
Sorry, Dennis. But no, I mean, I think when Sandeep talked about defining ROI, I think that's the key thing, is to make sure you take the time on the front end to do that analysis, to really understand what the ROI is and get buy-in from your key stakeholders, because that's critical. If you go down the road on a project and you find out that your KPIs, your metrics are not, you don't agree on the metrics, you've got a problem, right? So first of all, spend the time on the business analysis, making sure you understand what the ROI is very clearly. And then also set a process in place, a governance process, if you will, for the project, that as you go forward, you have very clearly defined periodic checks to make sure that value is being delivered in line with your KPIs, right? At different checkpoints in the project, right? So whatever those milestones are, they need to be tightly aligned with your KPIs and the ROI, and you need to be able to measure that at each milestone. And if there's a problem, then that needs to be addressed by the steering committee, the governance board, whatever, at that point, instead of just continuing down, spending a year on a project or whatever, and then looking at it at the end and saying, oops, wait a minute, we didn't achieve our metrics, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that's something to just add to that.
Yeah, absolutely. So critical. And I think the piece in there is that continued alignment that you checked on, right? Not just at the beginning of the project, but continuing to measure those throughout the project. So if you're going into the red, you're able to address that before we've lost a bunch of our return on investments. And we all know the most, expensive part of an implementation is those redesign, redo, re-implement. So, Dennis, I'm sorry, but
they answered a lot, but I will add a few things to what they said, and that is, really, once again, to understand those ROIs, and some of these companies already have a hard time getting data and some of their KPIs with the legacy system, right? So once again, it is important to do a lot of planning and understanding really where these gains are, making sure you validate your data in the legacy system before you move forward, so you understand the ROI and where you're trying to get. Because so often I had customers, Sandeep mentioned it, turnover is a huge thing. It costs money, but you got to capture that somehow. These little things, like I was talking about, the mislabeling, those are fines that come across the customer that aren't always being captured, expedite fees, stuff like that. We have to be able to track that to understand how we can address it. And once again, to really build that ROI of what we're going to get out of the system.
Absolutely.
I think Peter and Sandeep covered everything else, so they had great answers.
No, those are all fantastic. And I think those are a great place to start, as we end this conversation, all things not only as a pre-implementation planning phase, but also continued throughout the project. So thank you so much to all three of you. You've given such great insight. If we have questions, our audience here has questions, how do they get in touch with you? And let's start with you, Peter.
Yeah, so by all means, follow me, reach out to me on LinkedIn, message me, follow me, Peter Michael on LinkedIn. And anything I can do to answer any further questions or share any further thoughts. We have a lot of collateral on I'm with Infor, we all are. So, like Dennis is PCG. We have information on our company websites, lots of information. So just reach out. Happy to share.
Excellent. How about you, Dennis? How can we get in touch?
Yeah, for sure. Check out our website. We have a lot of videos around automotive, different sort of videos that you can observe, more information that we talked about today. And also on LinkedIn, you can follow me and send me a message through LinkedIn and I'll follow up. And like I said, there's a lot of information around automotive on our website.
Absolutely. Yes. And Sandeep.
Same as Peter. So we have a lot of information around where AI can be applied on the Infor websites, but also I'm happy to connect on LinkedIn and happy to have a chat on anything we talked about today.
Can I just add one more thing, Kyler? Sorry. I'm not trying to have the last word, but I forgot to say this. Is
Sorry.
we have just published a major survey, and I alluded to it when I was talking about it. It's called How Possible Happens. We've done this for different industries in Infor, and of course, in this case, we're talking about automotive. That's a major externally commissioned piece of research covering 400 automotive companies, and that is available. So if anyone is interested in that article, in that research paper, please reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'll be happy to send you a copy. So just wanted to put that there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I assume you can find that on the M4 website as well.
Yeah, it should be out there. I know they were uploading it. It's very, very new, but I think it's out there. But certainly, if you reach out to me, if you can't find it, have trouble navigating our website, whatever, please reach out to me directly. I'd be happy to send it to you directly.
Excellent. Excellent. That's really cool. I'm excited to see that piece for sure. That should be some great information. Well, thank you all for joining us today. Thank you to the audience for sharing all of your great insights in the comments here. It's a great way for us to kind of connect and share innovations as an industry. We really appreciate all of your time today, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So there you have it. Another solution in our spotlight. We want to thank Dennis, Peter, and Sandeep, and PCG and Infor. And we also appreciate your attendance as well. Until next time, I'm Doug Atkinson here at Solutions Review. Thanks for watching.
If your business would like to be featured in a future event, contact us today.